Clara Bennett, a struggling waitress, agreed to be a surrogate for a cold-hearted millionaire. But when emotions started to bloom, she couldn't believe how this deal would change her life forever. Before we dive into the story, let's do what Sleepless in Seattle taught us. Share where you're listening from. Comment below. The alarm pierces Clara's dreams like a needle, dragging her back to reality. She reaches for her phone, silencing it before the sound can seep through the thin walls of her studio apartment. Dawn hasn't touched the sky yet, but time is a luxury she can't afford. Clara pushes herself up from the futon that serves as both bed and couch, her muscles protesting another short night's sleep. The studio apartment spreads before her in its entirety. A kitchenette with peeling linoleum, a bathroom door that sticks, and walls that wear water stains like old tattoos. Morning light creeps through the single window, casting shadows across a stack of overdue bills on the counter. She moves through her morning routine with practiced efficiency, muscle memory taking over where exhaustion clouds her mind. The ancient coffee maker sputters to life, filling the small space with the aroma of cheap beans. Clara pulls on her waitress uniform, navy polyester that's been washed so many times the color has faded to an uncertain blue. The fabric stretches tight across her shoulders, a reminder that she can't afford to replace it yet. Her reflection in the bathroom mirror tells a familiar story. Dark circles shadow her hazel eyes, but determination burns bright within them. Clara twists her long brown hair into a neat bun, each movement precise and purposeful. No loose strands allowed. The diner's health code is strict, and she can't risk losing this job. A worn backpack waits by the door, containing her second uniform for the evening cleaning shift. 2 jobs, sometimes 3 when she can find temporary work. Still barely enough to keep her head above water. Clara's gaze drifts to the photograph propped against the coffee maker. Her mother, Clara Bennett, smiling despite the exhaustion evident in her eyes. The same eyes Clara sees in the mirror every morning. "Not today, Mom," Clara whispers, touching the silver locket at her throat, the only inheritance she has besides her mother's work ethic. "I'm going to figure this out." The coffee burns her tongue, but she drinks it anyway. Her stomach growls, protesting the liquid breakfast, but groceries will have to wait until payday. Clara shoulders her backpack, each bill in the stack on the counter weighing on her mind. Rent, utilities, medical bills from her mother's final illness. The numbers dance behind her eyes as she locks her apartment door. Outside, the city is waking up. Clara walks quickly, her sneakers silent on the cracked sidewalk. The morning air carries a hint of autumn, but she doesn't zip up her jacket. The cold keeps her alert, focused. She passes the same shops she sees every morning, the convenience store with its flickering neon, the laundromat where she spends Sunday evenings, the luxury boutique that seems to mock her with its pristine windows. Clara pauses, her reflection ghosting across the glass. Behind it, a pair of leather boots catches her eye, sleek, professional, the kind that would last for years instead of months. The price tag makes her wince. 3 weeks of groceries, or half a month's rent. She forces herself to look away, squaring her shoulders as she continues down the street. The city bus arrives 2 minutes late, its brakes squealing against the morning quiet. Clara swipes her transit card, watching the balance tick down. She finds a seat near the back, away from the businessman manspreading across 2 seats and the teenager whose music bleeds through his headphones. The city slides past the window, growing more polished, more expensive with each block. Downtown materializes in sharp angles of glass and steel, towers reaching toward a sky that's finally showing hints of pink. Clara checks her watch, calculating the minutes until her shift starts. She can't be late, not when Sandra is looking for any excuse to cut her hours. The diner comes into view, its neon sign half lit in the growing light. Through the windows, Clara sees the morning regulars already claiming their usual spots. Mr. Peterson at the counter reading yesterday's newspaper. The nurses from the hospital ending their night shift, their scrubs wrinkled and coffee cups empty. Each face familiar, each order memorized, yet none of them really see her. Clara straightens her name tag, pushes through the glass door. The bell chimes overhead, and the scent of coffee and grease wraps around her like a familiar blanket. She clocks in exactly 2 minutes early, just as Sandra emerges from the kitchen with narrowed eyes and a clipboard. "Table 6 needs coffee," Sandra says instead of good morning, and the health inspectors do this week. Make sure your station's spotless. Yes, ma'am. Clara reaches for the coffee pot, already moving toward table 6. Her feet ache in their cheap shoes, but she keeps her smile firmly in place. It's going to be a long day, but at least it's a paycheck. She can't afford to be anything less than perfect. The morning rush hits like a wave. Clara surfs it with practiced grace, balancing plates and remembering modifications and keeping coffee cups full. Her notebook fills with orders, her apron pocket with tips that are never quite enough. She moves between tables in a dance she's perfected over months, ignoring the occasional rude comment or wandering hand. During a rare quiet moment, Clara retreats to the break room. The space is barely larger than a closet, with a wobbly table and chairs that have seen better decades. She pulls out her own notebook, not for orders this time, but for dreams. The pages are filled with neat columns of numbers and goals. Get out of debt, find a better apartment, build an emergency fund, take night classes. Each item carefully planned, methodically researched. No wishful thinking allowed. Clara adds today's tips to her running total, comparing it against this month's bills. The numbers refuse to align, no matter how she arranges them. Her phone buzzes with a reminder. 3 hours until her shift ends, then 2 hours to get across town for her cleaning job. The notebook closes with a soft snap. Dreams have to wait. Reality demands attention. Back on the floor, Clara delivers plates and collects empty cups. Her smile never wavers, even when Mr. Harrison complains about his eggs for the 3rd time this week. She's learned to let comments slide off her like rain, to focus on the next task, the next table, the next hour. The diner's windows darken as morning shifts to afternoon. Clara's replacement arrives. Katie, a college student who treats the job like an inconvenience rather than a lifeline. Clara counts her tips in the break room, organizing bills by denomination. Not enough, never enough, but she tucks them carefully into her wallet anyway. Outside, the city has transformed. Sunshine bounces off glass buildings, and the sidewalks pulse with lunch crowds in business attire. Clara's uniform marks her as other, invisible to the streams of people talking into Bluetooth headsets and checking smart watches. She waits for the bus, calculating how many more shifts, more hours, more jobs it would take to join their ranks. The bus arrives, carrying her toward her second shift. Clara changes uniforms in a gas station bathroom, trading one polyester uniform for another. The cleaning company's logo sits heavy on her chest, another reminder of where she stands in the city's hierarchy. Hours blur together as she pushes her cart through office buildings after hours. Empty cubicles and conference rooms need dusting, vacuuming, sanitizing. Clara works methodically, thoroughly. Even this job matters. One missed spot could mean a complaint, could mean lost hours she can't afford to lose. Night has claimed the city by the time Clara's second shift ends. Her muscles ache, her feet throb, but she still has to check the job boards before bed. There might be weekend work, temporary positions, anything to help close the gap between income and expenses. The bus ride home is quieter now. Clara leans her head against the window, watching her reflection fade in and out against the city lights. In her mind, she's already planning tomorrow. Wake up, work, survive, repeat. It's not the life she dreamed of, but it's the life she has. Her phone chimes with a notification. Clara almost ignores it, too tired to deal with another bill reminder or credit card offer. But the sender's name catches her eye. Lisa Martinez, an acquaintance from the fertility clinic where Clara once inquired about egg donation. The message glows in the darkness. Urgent, surrogacy opportunity, large compensation, immediate need. Clara's heart stumbles. Her finger hovers over the link, trembling slightly. The numbers from her notebook flash through her mind. The mounting bills, the dreams deferred, the endless cycle of not quite enough. She clicks the link. The bus rumbles on through the night, carrying Clara toward a decision that will change everything. She reads the details once, twice, 3 times. The compensation figure makes her dizzy. More money than she'd make in years of double shifts and careful budgeting. But the implications hit harder than the numbers. 9 months of carrying someone else's child, 9 months of doctor's appointments and dietary restrictions and careful monitoring, 9 months of growing a life she'd have to give away. Clara's free hand drifts to her stomach, imagining. Her mother's voice echoes in her memory. Sometimes survival means making hard choices, baby girl. She thinks of the medical bills that claimed her mother's life savings, of the dreams that died with her. The bus reaches her stop. Clara steps out into the night, the phone still glowing in her hand. The weight of possibility presses against her chest as she climbs the stairs to her apartment. Each step brings a new question, a new doubt, a new hope. Inside her studio, Clara sinks onto her futon. The bills on the counter seem to watch her, waiting. She opens her notebook, adds a new column of numbers. The surrogacy compensation would clear her debts, give her a fresh start, maybe even enough for night classes. But the ethical implications twist in her stomach. Carrying a child for 9 months, feeling it grow, knowing it would never be hers. Clara touches her mother's locket, seeking guidance she knows won't come. Her phone chimes again. Another message from Lisa. Initial consultation tomorrow if interested. High-profile client. Discretion required. Clara looks around her tiny apartment, at the water stains tracking down the walls, at the futon that never quite feels like a real bed, at the photograph of her mother who worked herself to death chasing a better life. Her fingers type the response before her doubts can stop them. I'm interested. Send me the details. The message sends with a soft whoosh, like a door closing, or perhaps opening. Outside her window, the city continues its nighttime rhythm, unaware that, in a small studio apartment, a woman has just taken the first step toward changing her life. Earlier that day, across town, in a penthouse office that gleams like a jewel box, Victor Langford stands at floor-to-ceiling windows. The city spreads below him, a maze of lights and shadows he's learned to navigate but never quite inhabit. His reflection stares back. Tailored suit, steel gray hair at the temples, eyes that have forgotten how to soften. The surrogacy agency has vetted several candidates, his attorney says from behind him. James Chen's voice is carefully neutral, years of practice making even delicate subjects sound like routine business. All meet your specifications. Healthy, no family history of complications, clean background checks. Victor checks his watch, a habit that marks time between meetings rather than any real urgency. And the contracts? Ironclad. No possibility of emotional entanglements or future claims. James shuffles papers on Victor's desk. The agency specializes in high net worth clients. They understand discretion. Schedule the meetings, Victor says, still watching the city below. I want this handled quickly. James pauses. Are you sure about this approach? There are other ways to secure an heir. We've discussed this. Victor's tone carries the weight of board meetings where his word is law. No relationships, no marriages of convenience. This is cleaner. The attorney nods, gathering his papers. When the door closes behind him, Victor allows his shoulders to drop. The office feels cavernous suddenly, too large for one person, too empty despite its expensive furnishings. He crosses to his desk, running a finger along the polished wood. Family photos should sit here. Wife, children, evidence of a life well lived. Instead, there are only reports, contracts, the sterile markers of success. The elevator ride to his private parking garage gives him 30 seconds of forced stillness. Victor uses them to adjust his tie, check his messages, maintain the facade of a man in complete control. His Tesla whispers to life, carrying him through streets that grow quieter, more exclusive. The mansion rises from manicured grounds like a modern fortress. Security gates part at his approach, closing behind him with mechanical precision. Inside, silence greets him. The housekeeper has already left for the day, leaving everything perfect, untouched. Victor moves through rooms designed by the city's top decorator, sophisticated, tasteful, and utterly devoid of life. His footsteps echo on marble floors as he pours himself a glass of single malt scotch. The liquid catches light from recessed fixtures, amber warmth in a space that knows none. Tomorrow he'll meet the first potential surrogate. Another business transaction, another carefully controlled situation. Victor raises his glass to his reflection in the window, a silent toast to decisions that can't hurt if you don't let them matter. Morning finds Clara in the fertility clinic's waiting room, her hands smoothing invisible wrinkles from her best dress. It's still cheap, polyester pretending to be silk, but it's the closest thing to professional she owns. The clinic smells of antiseptic and expensive perfume, making her increasingly aware of her drugstore body spray. Miss Bennett? A coordinator appears, clipboard in hand. Her smile is practiced, pleasant. Mr. Langford is ready to see you. Clara follows her down a hallway lined with framed photos of smiling babies. Her shoes, the same ones she wears for waitressing, squeak slightly on the polished floor. The coordinator's heels click a perfect rhythm, like a metronome counting down to something Clara can't quite grasp. The conference room door opens to reveal floor-to-ceiling windows and a view that makes Clara's stomach drop. Victor Langford stands with his back to the door, a silhouette cut from darker stuff than ordinary men. When he turns, his eyes hit her like winter. Blue, sharp, assessing. Ms. Bennett. His voice matches his appearance, controlled, expensive. Please, sit. Clara forces her spine straight as she takes a seat across the massive table. Her hands want to fidget, but she folds them carefully in her lap. Mr. Langford. I'll be direct. He sits, the movement elegant despite its simplicity. I'm seeking a surrogate. The compensation is substantial, but so are my requirements. No emotional involvement, no complications, a clean professional transaction. Clara meets his gaze steadily. I understand business, Mr. Langford. I'm here to do a job. Something flickers in his expression, surprise, perhaps, at her directness. The coordinator begins explaining medical requirements, legal obligations, financial terms. Clara listens with half her attention, the other half watching Victor Langford. He's handsome in the way expensive things are handsome. Perfect, untouchable, slightly cold. Do you have any questions? The coordinator's voice breaks through Clara's observations. The contract, Clara says. I'd like to review it thoroughly before signing. Victor's eyebrow raises slightly. Of course. Take whatever time you need. He slides a thick document across the table. Though time is something of a factor. Clara accepts the contract, her fingers brushing the heavy paper. I'll have my answer tomorrow. Tomorrow, then. Victor stands, already reaching for his phone. The meeting is clearly over. Clara walks out of the clinic into sunshine that feels less bright than before. The contract weighs heavy in her bag, like a book of spells waiting to be read. She takes the bus home, the fancy office building shrinking behind her until it seems like something from another world. That night, Clara reads every page of the contract twice. The language is dense, legal, designed to protect Victor Langford from any future claims. The compensation figure makes her breath catch, enough to clear her debts, start fresh, maybe even buy those boots in the window. But it's the medical details that make her pause. 9 months of her body not being her own. Regular checkups, dietary restrictions, exercise requirements, and at the end, a clean break. No contact, no rights, no looking back. Clara touches her flat stomach, trying to imagine it swelling with a child that isn't hers. Her mother's photo watches from its place by the coffee maker. What would you do, Mom? She whispers to the silence. Morning comes too quickly. Clara dresses carefully in the same polyester dress, her hands trembling slightly as she fastens her mother's locket. The clinic feels different today, less intimidating, more like a stage where she'll play her part. Victor Langford waits in the same conference room, this time seated at the table. A pen sits before him, elegant and expensive like everything else about him. The contract lies between them like a bridge or a barrier. You've reviewed everything? His voice gives nothing away. Clara nods. I have. She takes the seat across from him, her back straight. I understand what's required. And you agree to the terms? No emotional involvement, no future contact? This is business, Mr. Langford. Clara meets his eyes. Nothing more. Something passes between them. A moment of recognition, perhaps of two people agreeing to deny the humanity of what they're about to do. Victor slides the contract toward her, the pen following like an afterthought. Clara's hand hovers over the pen. In her mind, she sees the bills on her counter, the dreams in her notebook, the future that's always been just out of reach. She sees 9 months of her life dedicated to growing a stranger's child. She sees the moment she'll have to let go. The pen feels heavy as she lifts it. Victor watches her with those winter eyes, his expression unreadable. Clara signs her name with careful strokes, each letter a step towards something she can't quite see. Victor signs after her, his signature flowing and confident. The coordinator appears as if by magic, witnessing their signatures, making everything official. Just like that, Clara's body is no longer entirely her own. The first appointment is scheduled for next week, the coordinator says, gathering the contracts. We'll be in touch with the details. Clara stands, smoothing her dress more out of habit than necessity. Victor rises as well, extending his hand. Thank you, Miss Bennett. I trust our arrangement will be mutually beneficial. His hand is warm despite his cold demeanor. Clara wonders if he feels it too, the weight of what they've just agreed to, the impossibility of keeping emotions completely at bay. But his expression remains professional, distant. Good day, Mr. Langford. Clara turns and walks out, her steps measured until she reaches the elevator. Only then does she let out the breath she's been holding. In the lobby, Clara catches her reflection in the polished marble walls. She looks the same, but everything has changed. 9 months stretch before her like an uncharted sea. She straightens her shoulders, adjusts her mother's locket, and steps out into the sunshine. Behind her, in the conference room 30 floors above, Victor Langford stands at the windows again. He watches a small figure exit the building. Clara Bennett, now carrying the future of his family line. His hand presses against the cooled glass, a gesture he doesn't quite understand. The city continues its eternal rhythm below them both. Neither knows yet how their carefully controlled arrangement will unravel, how emotions will creep in despite their best defenses, how 9 months can change everything they thought they knew about love, trust, and the true meaning of family. For now, they each return to their separate worlds, Clara to her tiny studio apartment, Victor to his elegant mansion. The contract sits in a leather folder, binding them together in ways neither can imagine. Their story has begun, though they don't know it yet. And like all the best stories, it will refuse to follow the neat, orderly path they've tried to lay out for it. The steady whoosh-whoosh of the baby's heartbeat fills the examination room. Clara lies back on the padded table, the thin paper crinkling beneath her as Dr. Ramirez glides the ultrasound wand across her slightly rounded belly. The cold gel makes her shiver, but she keeps her expression neutral, professional. Victor Langford stands near the door, arms crossed over his expensive suit. His reflection in the darkened window shows a man carved from marble, still, controlled, watching the monitor with the same detached interest he might show a financial report. But his knuckles whiten as he grips his watch, and Clara notices. The fetus is developing normally, Dr. Ramirez says, her voice warm against the sterile air. Strong heartbeat, good size for 14 weeks. Clara's hand drifts to her stomach, feeling the slight swell beneath her simple cotton dress. The life growing inside her feels both intimate and foreign, a reminder of the contract that binds her to Victor Langford for the next 6 months. Are there any risks we should be aware of? Victor's voice cuts through the rhythmic heartbeat, precise as a surgeon's blade. Dr. Ramirez turns slightly. Nothing concerning at this stage, but Ms. Bennett should continue taking her prenatal vitamins and maintain the diet plan we discussed. Clara nods, already knowing the list by heart. No caffeine, no raw fish, no soft cheeses. Her body isn't entirely her own anymore. It belongs to the contract, to the baby, to Victor's needs. She tries not to think about how the morning sickness has made her late to her waitressing job twice this week. And exercise, Victor presses, his eyes still fixed on the monitor. Moderate activity is fine, walking, swimming, prenatal yoga if she's interested. Doctor, Ramirez hands Clara a tissue to wipe away the gel, but nothing too strenuous. The baby's heartbeat fades as the doctor turns off the machine. Clara sits up slowly, smoothing her dress over her belly. The silence feels heavy, loaded with words neither she nor Victor will speak. Victor checks his watch, a habit Clara has noticed he falls back on when uncomfortable. Is there anything else we need to discuss? Not today. Dr. Ramirez smiles warmly at Clara. I'll see you again in 2 weeks. Call if you have any concerns before then. They walk to the elevator in silence, their footsteps echoing off the polished floors. Clara presses the down button, hyper-aware of Victor's presence beside her. He smells of expensive cologne and power, a reminder of the world she's temporarily stepped into but can never truly belong to. The elevator arrives with a soft ding. Clara steps in, Victor following. Their reflections multiply in the mirrored walls, the wealthy businessman and the surrogate mother, connected by circumstance but separated by everything else. Just before the doors close, Victor speaks. Let me know if you need anything. His voice is quiet, almost gentle, but his eyes remain fixed on the changing floor numbers. I'm fine, Clara says, the words automatic. She doesn't look at him, doesn't acknowledge the slight softening in his tone. The contract sits between them like a wall, and she won't be the one to crack it. When the elevator reaches the lobby, they part without another word. Clara walks out into the sunshine, leaving Victor to his waiting Tesla and his carefully ordered world. She has a bus to catch and a shift at the diner in an hour. Reality doesn't pause for ultrasound appointments or moments of weakness. But as she walks to the bus stop, her hand strays to her belly. The baby's heartbeat echoes in her memory, strong and steady, like a drum, beating out a rhythm she's afraid to dance to. Clara's knees hit the cold bathroom tile as another wave of nausea grips her. The morning sickness has gotten worse over the past week, striking without warning at all hours. She leans over the toilet, her body heaving, sweat beading on her forehead. The tiny bathroom spins slightly when she opens her eyes. Dawn barely touches the window, but she's been up for hours, trapped in this cycle of nausea and brief respite. Her waitressing uniform hangs on the door, a reminder of the shift she should be preparing for. A knock at her apartment door startles her. Clara freezes, one hand pressed against her mouth. "Clara?" Victor Langford's voice, unexpected and unwelcome, carries through the thin walls. "It's Victor." She tries to stand, but her legs shake beneath her. Just a minute." The words come out weak, interrupted by another surge of nausea. "Are you all right?" His voice sharpens with concern. "I'm coming in." Clara wants to protest, but she can't speak. The door opens. She forgot to lock it last night, too exhausted after her cleaning shift. Victor's footsteps move through her tiny studio apartment, followed by a sharp intake of breath when he reaches the bathroom doorway. "Clara?" His voice loses its usual polish. He kneels beside her, one hand hovering uncertainly near her shoulder. "You need a doctor." She shakes her head, mortified by his presence, by her weakness, by the stark contrast between his perfectly pressed suit and her sweat-dampened t-shirt. "I'll be fine. You don't need to be here." But Victor doesn't leave. Instead, he fills a glass with water and helps her to the futon that serves as her bed. His hand lingers on her shoulder, steadier than she expects. "I'm not leaving until I know you're okay." Clara sips the water slowly, avoiding his gaze. Her studio apartment seems smaller with him in it, all its shabbiness exposed to his wealthy eyes. But when she glances up, she doesn't see judgment in his expression, only concern, and something softer that makes her heart stutter. "This isn't part of the contract," she manages, her voice hoarse. "The contract ensures the health of both you and the baby." Victor's tone is professional again, but his hand remains on her shoulder. Severe morning sickness needs medical attention. Clara wants to argue to maintain the careful distance they've established, but exhaustion wins. She nods slightly, letting her eyes close. "Okay." She feels Victor shift, reaching for his phone. As he arranges for a doctor to come to her apartment, Clara finds herself leaning into his touch, just a little. The warmth of his hand anchors her, makes the room stop spinning. Neither of them speaks of this moment of weakness, this crack in their professional facade. But when Clara opens her eyes again, she catches Victor watching her with an expression she's never seen before, like he's seeing her, really seeing her, for the first time. The morning light strengthens, painting shadows on her walls. Clara's hand rests on her stomach, feeling the slight curve that's begun to show. Victor's fingers brush against hers for just a moment, and something shifts between them. Subtle as a change in the weather, but just as undeniable. Rain drums against the car windows, turning the world outside into a gray blur. Clara sits in the passenger seat of Victor's Tesla, watching droplets race down the glass. The leather seat feels too luxurious against her back, like something she might spoil just by touching. They're stuck in traffic, brake lights glowing red through the rain. Victor's hands rest on the steering wheel, his signet ring catching the dim light. The silence between them feels different today, less like a wall and more like a shared breath. "Why did you agree to this?" Victor's question breaks the quiet, surprising them both. Clara turns slightly, studying his profile. In the gray light, he looks less intimidating, more human. "I wanted a way out," she says finally, the truth slipping past her usual defenses. Out of debt, out of the constant struggle, this seemed like a way to buy freedom. Victor's grip tightens on the steering wheel. Freedom doesn't always come with wealth. Bitterness edges his words, sharp enough to cut. The traffic inches forward. Clara watches a woman hurry past on the sidewalk, her umbrella fighting the wind. No, she agrees softly. Sometimes it just gives you a bigger cage. Victor glances at her, something flickering in his eyes. You sound like you speak from experience. My mother. Clara touches the locket at her throat. She worked 3 jobs, saved every penny, did everything right, but in the end, the medical bills took everything. She died thinking she'd failed me. The words hang in the air between them. Victor's jaw clenches, and Clara sees something crack in his carefully maintained facade. My wealth hasn't brought me happiness, he admits, his voice low. Just people who want something from me. Clara's heart twists unexpectedly. She sees beyond the expensive suit and cold demeanor to the loneliness beneath. We all want something we can't have, don't we? Victor doesn't answer, but his eyes meet hers in the rearview mirror. Something passes between them, understanding perhaps, or recognition of a shared wound. The rain continues its steady rhythm, but the silence in the car has changed again, filled with things neither of them is ready to name. They arrive at the clinic, Victor pulling smoothly into a reserved parking space. Clara reaches for her door handle, but Victor's voice stops her. Clara. He hesitates, something vulnerable in his expression. Thank you for being honest with me. She offers him a small smile, genuine despite her reservations. Thank you for asking. They walk into the clinic together, not touching, but somehow closer than before. The contract still binds them, but its edges have begun to blur, softened by rain and shared confidences. The power goes out during the worst storm of the season. Clara stands in the darkened hallway of Victor's mansion, where she's staying temporarily due to a minor health scare. Lightning flashes through tall windows, illuminating unfamiliar shapes in the darkness. A flutter in her belly stops her mid-step. Clara gasps, her hand flying to her stomach. There it is again, a definite movement, like butterfly wings against her ribs. The baby is kicking for the first time. Tears spring to her eyes, unexpected and overwhelming. In this moment, all the carefully maintained boundaries blur. This isn't just a contract anymore. It's a life, growing and moving inside her. A beam of light cuts through the darkness. Victor appears at the end of the hall, flashlight in hand. Is everything all right? Clara doesn't think, doesn't hesitate. She crosses to him, takes his free hand and places it on her belly. Feel that? The baby kicks again, stronger this time. Victor's eyes widen, the flashlight beam trembling slightly. That's incredible, he whispers, all pretense of detachment falling away. They stand there in the darkness, his hand warm against her stomach, waiting for another movement. When it comes, Victor's breath catches. Clara looks up to find him watching her, his expression raw with wonder. Would you like to sit down? He asks softly, gesturing toward the library. Candles already burn there, casting a warm glow through the doorway. Clara nods, suddenly aware of how intimate this moment has become. They settle onto a leather sofa, the storm raging outside. Victor's hand lingers near her belly, as if drawn by an invisible force. I'm scared, Clara admits, the words slipping out before she can stop them. That once this is over, I'll be forgotten, just a chapter in someone else's story. Lightning illuminates Victor's face, showing a vulnerability she's never seen before. I'm scared of being used, he confesses, his voice barely audible above the thunder, of giving everything and getting nothing in return. The candlelight flickers between them, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Clara feels the baby move again, a gentle reminder of what binds them together. Victor's hand finds hers in the darkness, and neither pulls away. They don't speak of what this means, of the feelings growing between them as surely as the child within her. The contract still exists, a paper barrier against the heart's wishes. But in this moment, as thunder shakes the windows and candles gutter in the draft, something shifts. Clara looks at Victor's profile, softened by candlelight, and sees not the wealthy businessman who hired her, but a man as lonely and afraid as she is. His thumb traces circles on her palm, perhaps unconsciously, and her heart beats a warning rhythm against her ribs. The storm rages on outside, but here in the library, a different kind of storm is brewing, one made of unspoken words and tentative touches, of fears faced and walls beginning to crumble. The baby kicks again, as if sensing the changing currents between its parents. Neither Clara nor Victor moves to break the spell. They sit together in the candlelight, their hands entwined. while the rain washes away the careful distance they've maintained. Tomorrow they'll remember the contract. Tomorrow they'll rebuild their walls. But for now, they allow themselves this moment of connection, this brief escape from the roles they've assigned themselves. The candles burn lower, the storm gradually subsides, and something new takes root in the space between heartbeats. Afternoon light spills through the sunroom's floor-to-ceiling windows, painting golden stripes across Clara's arms. She shifts on the plush window seat, one hand absently rubbing her swollen belly while she watches the garden outside. The flowers march in perfect rows, yellow daffodils, purple irises, white lilies, each variety contained in its designated space. Even nature bends to Victor Langford's need for control. The baby kicks, a flutter beneath her palm that draws an involuntary smile. The expression fades as quickly as it appears, replaced by a familiar ache in her chest. 5 months into the surrogacy, and Clara can no longer pretend this is just a transaction. Every kick, every heartbeat on the ultrasound monitor, every midnight craving ties her closer to the life growing inside her. Worse still, the mansion has started feeling like home. Not the cold shrine to wealth she first encountered, but a place where she belongs. Clara closes her eyes against the thought. Belonging is dangerous. The contract sitting in Victor's study spells out her role in clear terms. Vessel, not mother. Guest, not family. The baby kicks again, harder this time, as if protesting these artificial boundaries. Footsteps in the hallway make her straighten, schooling her features into careful neutrality. Victor appears in the doorway, if carrying a silver tray with such focused precision that Clara almost smiles. The great Victor Langford, titan of industry, reduced to delivery boy by her morning sickness. He sets the tray on the side table without ceremony, ginger tea steaming in a delicate cup, plain crackers arranged on a china plate worth more than her monthly rent. Clara catches his scent as he moves past, something crisp and expensive that she's grown shamefully familiar with. His eyes linger on her profile for a moment too long, and she forces herself not to turn, not to acknowledge the weight of his gaze. "Thank you," she says quietly, reaching for the tea. Their fingers don't touch. They never do, not since that first handshake in the clinic. Victor nods, already turning away. At the doorway he pauses, shoulders tense beneath his perfectly tailored shirt. "If you need anything else..." His voice comes out softer than usual, almost gentle. "Just ask." Before Clara can respond, he's gone, footsteps fading down the marble hallway. She wraps both hands around the teacup, letting its warmth seep into her fingers. Frustration and longing war in her chest. Frustration at his carefully measured kindness, longing for something more than these polite exchanges. She's seen glimpses of the man beneath the corporate armor, the way his hand hovers protectively near her elbow when they climb stairs. How he remembers her favorite fruits without being told. The rare moments when his smile reaches his eyes, transforming his whole face into something achingly human. But each glimpse is followed by withdrawal, as if he catches himself caring too much. Clara sips her tea, bitter despite the honey he's added. She's a fool to hope for more, to imagine breaking through walls built from years of distrust and disappointment. Victor Langford may care about his heir, but Clara herself is just another contract to be fulfilled. The baby kicks again, and Clara blinks back sudden tears. 5 months to go. 5 months to guard her heart against impossible wishes. 5 months until she walks away from this mansion and the man whose careful kindness has become both comfort and torture. Later that evening, Clara follows Dr. Ramirez through her standard checkup routine. The doctor's office, tucked into a quiet corner of the mansion's ground floor, feels more like a spa than a medical space. Soft music plays from hidden speakers, and the examination table is draped in sheets so fine they feel like water against her skin. "Blood pressure is perfect," Dr. Ramirez says, making notes on her tablet. "How's the morning sickness?" "Better." Clara pulls her sweater back on, grateful for its softness against her increasingly sensitive skin. "The ginger tea helps." Dr. Ramirez's eyes crinkle knowingly. "Mr. Langford's special blend, he had it imported from Japan, you know. Called the supplier personally to verify the organic certification." Clara absorbs this information with a careful nod, adding it to her mental collection of Victor's unspoken gestures. The doctor reviews a few more points. diet recommendations, exercise guidelines, warning signs to watch for before declaring the checkup complete. Gathering her things, Clara heads for the foyer. The mansion's corridors are hushed at this hour, her footsteps muffled by thick carpets. As she passes Victor's study, voices drift through the partially open door. She should keep walking. She knows this, but something in Victor's tone, strained, almost raw, stops her in her tracks. "I can't afford to get attached, Henry." Victor's voice carries the weight of old pain. "I've made that mistake before. Love isn't a guarantee, it's a liability." Clara presses a hand to the wall, steadying herself. She recognizes the second voice as Henry Clarkson, Victor's attorney and oldest friend. "This isn't the same, Victor." Henry's sigh speaks of long familiarity with this argument. "Clara isn't like the others. She's honest, and she cares. Not about your money, but about you." "I want to believe that." Victor's voice cracks slightly, the sound like a physical blow to Clara's chest. "But what if I'm wrong? What if I open up and she walks away like the rest?" Clara's eyes fill with tears, her free hand pressing against her mouth to hold back a sound. Everything clicks into place. The careful distance, the measured kindness, the walls she's been trying so hard to scale. Victor does care. He cares so much it terrifies him, drives him deeper into his fortress of control and contracts. The realization crystallizes in her chest, sharp-edged and undeniable. She loves him. Not his wealth or his power, but the man who imports specialty and hovers protectively on staircases. The man whose fears run as deep as her own. But his words echo in her mind. Love isn't a guarantee, it's a liability. As long as he views love as a risk to be managed, a potential betrayal to be avoided, they can never be more than what the contract dictates. Her presence in his life has an expiration date, printed in black and white on legal paper. Clara steps back from the door, one hand cradling her belly where their child grows. Tears slip down her cheeks as she turns away, fleeing the weight of everything she's heard. She leaves the mansion without a word, the cooling evening air doing nothing to ease the ache in her chest. Morning arrives with painful clarity. Clara moves through the mansion's familiar rooms like a ghost. Her shoulders straight, her smile polite but empty. The walls she spent months trying to scale now rise within her own chest, protecting her heart from hopes she can no longer afford. Victor finds her at breakfast, the morning paper crisp in his hands. "Did you sleep well?" he asks, his tone carefully neutral. Clara nods without meeting his gaze, focusing on the toast she can barely stomach. Silence stretches between them, heavy with unspoken words. She can feel his confusion, his growing frustration at her withdrawal, but she doesn't dare look up. One glimpse of vulnerability in those winter blue eyes might shatter her resolve. She's mapped out the remaining months in her mind, each day a step toward goodbye. No more lingering conversations over tea. No more shared smiles at the baby's movements. No more pretending this mansion could ever be her home. Victor watches her leave the dining room, his knuckles white against the newspaper. She feels his eyes on her back, questioning, perhaps even hurt. But he doesn't call her back. He doesn't break the careful choreography of their arrangement to demand answers. Clara's footsteps echo through the marble halls, each one carrying her further from the man she loves and the future she can't have. The baby kicks, as if sensing her distress, and Clara presses a hand to her side. "I'm sorry, little one," she whispers. Sometimes loving someone means knowing when to let go. The days that follow settle into a new rhythm, each hour marked by careful avoidance and measured words. Clara attends her checkups, takes her vitamins, follows every instruction to the letter. But the warmth has drained from her voice, leaving behind responses so professional they could have been scripted. Victor tries to breach the distance in his own way. He leaves fresh flowers in the sunroom, orders her favorite foods, hovers in doorways as if wanting to say more. But Clara meets each gesture with quiet thanks and quick retreats, building her defenses with every step. During afternoon tea, a ritual they once shared with almost comfortable silence, Clara keeps her eyes on her cup, counting the minutes until she can excuse herself. Victor sits in his usual chair, tension radiating from his rigid posture. "The garden looks particularly nice today," he offers, his voice straining for normalcy. "Yes, it does." Clara doesn't elaborate, doesn't share her thoughts about the daffodils as she might have last week. She feels his frustration like a physical presence, but she can't bring herself to meet his eyes. One glimpse of the confusion there, the hurt she pretends not to see, might crack her carefully constructed walls. The baby kicks, drawing her hand to her belly automatically. Victor's breath catches. He always watches these moments with poorly concealed wonder. Clara forces herself to lower her hand to deny him this small connection. The air grows thick with unspoken words. "Clara," Victor starts, then stops, his fingers tightening on his armrest. The sound of her name in his voice, rare and almost pleading, threatens to undo her. "I should rest," she says quickly, rising with practiced care. "Doctor's orders." She retreats to her room, the one space in this sprawling mansion where she can let her masks slip. Outside her window, the garden stretches in its perfect rows, each flower knowing its place, its purpose, its season to fade. Clara presses her forehead to the cool glass, watching shadows lengthen across the lawn. In the reflection, she sees what she's become, a ghost in a house of memories not yet made, holding her heart together with borrowed time. The baby kicks again, stronger now, as if protesting the growing distance between its parents. But that's the cruel joke, isn't it? They're not really parents, not really anything but two people bound by ink and paper, pretending not to feel the weight of everything unsaid. 4 months left. Clara straightens her shoulders, adjusts her mask. She can do this. She can walk these halls like a stranger, weather Victor's confused looks, ignore the way her heart tries to reach for his. She can protect herself from the inevitable goodbye. In his study, Victor stands at the window, watching the same garden with unseeing eyes. The distance between them stretches like a chasm, filled with fear and pride and words neither dares to speak. The mansion echoes with their silence, a tomb for feelings that never had a chance to bloom. Clara's fingers trace the edge of a cream-colored blanket, smoothing invisible wrinkles as sunlight streams through the nursery windows. The room smells of fresh paint and new beginnings. Soft blue walls, delicate clouds stenciled near the ceiling, plush animals arranged with careful precision. Her growing belly brushes against the cherry wood crib as she adjusts a mobile of silver stars. "You'll have everything you need," she whispers, one hand resting on her stomach. The baby kicks in response, a flutter beneath her palm that sends an ache through her chest. 8 months of carrying this child, of feeling every movement, every hiccup, every midnight dance party. 1 month left until she has to walk away. Clara busies herself with reorganizing the changing table supplies for the 3rd time today. Diapers stacked by size, wipes within easy reach, cream and powder arranged in neat rows. If she focuses on these tasks, these concrete, manageable things, she won't have to think about the way Victor's presence fills the doorway behind her. His reflection appears in the nursery window, a dark figure against all this softness. Clara keeps her movement steady, mechanical. Fold the onesie. Stack it with the others. Don't look up. Don't remember how his hand felt on your back during the last ultrasound. You've done a great job with the nursery. Victor's voice carries that careful neutrality he's perfected over the years, like expensive whiskey watered down to nothing. Thank you. Clara adjusts a blanket that doesn't need adjusting, her fingers catching on the delicate eyelet trim. The silence stretches between them, thick with all the things they won't say. Victor steps into the room, his Italian leather shoes silent on the plush carpet. The pediatrician called. She'd like to schedule a meeting next week to discuss the birth plan. I'll check my schedule. Clara moves to the dresser, organizing tiny socks by color. Her hands want to shake, but she won't let them. Not here. Not where he can see. Clara? There's something in his voice now. Frustration, maybe, or concern. She doesn't turn to find out which. We should talk about. The contract is clear about what happens after the birth. The words come out sharper than she intends, cutting through the nursery's peaceful atmosphere. There's nothing to discuss. Victor's reflection shows his jaw tightening, that muscle that always jumps when he's holding back words. He takes a step toward her, then stops. His hand rises, falls back to his side. Right, the contract. His footsteps retreat, echoing down the hallway like a countdown she can't stop. Clara waits until she can't hear him anymore before she lets her hands drop to the dresser. Her fingers curl against the wood, knuckles white with the effort of holding herself together. A tear splashes on the surface, and she wipes it away quickly, angry at her own weakness. "This is better," she tells her reflection in the window, "keeping my distance, following the plan." But the words ring hollow in the empty nursery, and the baby kicks again, as if in protest. Clara sinks into the glider by the window, letting the gentle motion soothe her raw nerves. Outside, the mansion's gardens stretch toward the horizon. Roses and hydrangeas and carefully tended paths she's walked 100 times in the past months. Everything here is beautiful, planned, perfect. Everything here will belong to someone else. The doctor's appointments blur together over the next weeks. Clara answers questions with practiced detachment, nods at the right moments, keeps her eyes fixed on the ultrasound screen instead of Victor's face. She pretends not to notice how he still reaches for her when the baby moves, how his hand hovers near hers during every checkup before falling away. The nursery becomes her sanctuary and her prison. She spends hours there talking to the baby about nothing and everything, careful to keep her voice down when footsteps pass the door. Victor appears less frequently now, respecting the wall she's built between them. It's what she wanted. It's what she needs. It's killing her. At night, alone in her assigned suite down the hall from the nursery, Clara wraps her arms around her belly and allows herself to cry. Silent tears that soak into expensive pillowcases, mourning something she never should have wanted in the first place. When morning comes, she wipes her eyes, straightens her spine, and returns to the nursery to fold more tiny clothes that will dress a baby she won't raise. The contractions start on a Tuesday morning while Clara is arranging stuffed animals in the crib. They're mild at first, easy to ignore as she focuses on her tasks. But by afternoon, there's no denying what's happening. Her water breaks in the nursery, a sudden gush that soaks through her dress and onto the carpet. "Miss Bennett?" The housekeeper's voice carries through the door. "Mr. Langford asked me to check on you." "I'm fine." Clara grips the edge of the crib, breathing through another contraction. "Just tell him." Pain cuts off her words, sharper this time. The door opens anyway, and Margaret's eyes widen at the scene. "Oh, sweetheart." She's at Clara's side in an instant, one arm around her waist. "Let's get you to the hospital." Everything moves quickly after that. The drive to the hospital is a blur of contractions and careful breathing. Victor meets them there, his face tight with concern that Clara refuses to acknowledge. The delivery room smells of antiseptic and anticipation, machines beeping in rhythm with her racing heart. Deep breaths, the nurse coaches as another contraction hits. Clara grips the sheets, her knuckles white. Victor stands nearby, his presence both comfort and torment. His hand hovers near hers, not quite touching, and she fights the urge to grab it. Hours pass in a haze of pain and determination. The doctor's voice seems to come from far away. "Push now, Clara. The baby's almost here." Clara bears down, every muscle straining. Through the fog of exhaustion, she feels Victor move closer, his warmth at her shoulder. "You're doing great," he murmurs, and for once she's too tired to maintain the distance between them. A cry pierces the air, strong, defiant, perfect. Clara's heart stops, then restarts with a different rhythm. The doctor lifts the baby, and time freezes. In that moment, all the walls she's built crumble to dust. "It's a boy," the doctor announces, placing the squalling infant on Clara's chest. He's tiny and red and absolutely beautiful. Clara's hands shake as she touches his cheek, counts his fingers, memorizes the curve of his nose. "Hey there," she whispers, and his eyes flutter open at the sound of her voice. "You're perfect." For a few precious minutes, the world shrinks to just this. Her son's weight against her chest, his newborn scent, the way his fingers curl around hers. She doesn't look at Victor, doesn't think about what comes next. She just breathes in this moment, trying to store every detail in her heart. But reality crashes back when the nurse steps forward. "Would you like to hold your son, Mr. Langford?" Clara's arms tighten instinctively around the baby. Then she forces them to relax, remembering her place, remembering the contract. With trembling hands, she lifts the baby toward Victor. "Take care of our child," she whispers, her voice breaking on the word "our." Before Victor can respond, before she can change her mind, Clara turns away. Each step toward the door feels like walking through deep water, every muscle screaming at her to turn back. She doesn't look back. Can't look back. The door closes behind her with a soft click, that echoes like a gunshot in her chest. Clara makes it halfway down the hallway before her legs give out. She slides down the wall, one hand pressed to her mouth to hold in the sobs that want to tear free. In the delivery room, Victor stands alone with his son, the weight of the tiny body both blessing and burden. The baby's eyes drift closed, peaceful and unaware of the storm raging around him. Through the window, dawn paints the sky in shades of pink and gold. A new day, a new life, and an emptiness Victor never expected to feel. He sinks into a chair, studying his son's features. There's something of Clara in the curve of his mouth, the stubborn set of his chin. The thought sends an ache through Victor's chest that has nothing to do with fatherhood. "I thought I could do this alone," he confesses to the sleeping infant. "I was wrong." The words hang in the sterile air, too late for the one person who needed to hear them. The baby stirs, one tiny fist wrapping around Victor's finger. The simple gesture breaks something loose in his chest. All the feelings he's denied, all the walls he's hidden behind. Clara's absence feels like a physical wound, the space she should occupy glaringly empty. Memories flood his mind. Clara laughing in the sunroom, her face glowing as she felt the baby kick. The way she looked at him when she thought he wouldn't notice. He'd been so focused on protecting himself from pain that he'd missed the chance at something real. "I made a mistake," Victor tells his son, whose grip on his finger remains strong and sure. The touch ignites something in him, a determination that burns through years of careful control. He can't let Clara walk away, can't pretend that what grew between them was just business. The baby makes a small sound, drawing Victor's attention back to the present. In his son's face, he sees both an ending and a beginning. The end of his solitary existence, the beginning of a chance to make things right. Victor stands, cradling his son close. Outside the window, the city wakes to a new day. Somewhere out there, Clara is trying to piece herself back together, believing she has to face the future alone. Victor watches the sunrise, his son warm against his chest, and knows with sudden clarity that he can't let that happen. The contract that brought them together now feels like chains holding them apart. But contracts can be broken, walls can come down, and hearts can change. Victor looks down at his son, seeing in the tiny face all the possibilities he's been too afraid to reach for. "We're going to fix this," he promises the sleeping infant. "Both of you deserve better than what I've given." The baby sighs in his sleep, and Victor feels the last of his defenses crumble. It's time to stop hiding behind legal documents and careful distance. It's time to fight for the family he never knew he wanted, the family that was right in front of him all along. Rain taps against the cafe window, each drop a quiet echo of Clara's thoughts. Her untouched coffee grows cold, wisps of steam long since disappeared into the dim afternoon light. Outside, people hurry past with umbrellas and downturned faces, but Clara sees only shadows, memories that refuse to fade. The baby's face haunts her most. Those eyes, so like Victor's in shape but warmed by an innocence he never shows. Clara's fingers trace the rim of her cup, remembering the weight of that tiny body in her arms, the perfect trust of small hands gripping her finger. "Can I get you anything else?" The waitress hovers, order pad ready. Her name tag reads Amy. Clara remembers wearing similar tags, serving similar coffees in what feels like another lifetime. "No, thank you." Clara's voice comes out rough. She hasn't used it much lately, filling her days with extra shifts that leave no room for conversation. Or thought, or feeling. The mansion looms in her mind. Not the cold, sterile space she first entered, but the home it had become. Sunlight streaming through tall windows, the scent of fresh flowers in the foyer, the quiet comfort of evening conversations with Victor in his study. His hesitant kindness appearing in small gestures, a hand at her elbow during doctor's appointments, fresh ginger tea for morning sickness, books left casually on her nightstand. Clara presses her palm against her flat stomach, muscle memory seeking movement that's no longer there. The emptiness aches worse than any physical pain she's known. Across town, Victor Langford stares unseeing at the documents spread across his desk. Quarterly reports and investment analyses blur into meaningless patterns. The words that once commanded his full attention now slip away like water. He reaches for his phone, thumb hovering over the photos he can't bring himself to delete. Clara in the garden, one hand shading her eyes from the sun, the other resting on her growing belly. Clara asleep in the library, a book fallen open in her lap. Clara laughing at something Margaret said, her whole face lit with joy. The intercom buzzes. "Mr. Langford, your 3 o'clock is here. Cancel it." His voice comes out sharper than intended. "Cancel everything today." Night falls early, winter settling over the city like a heavy blanket. Victor stands in the nursery doorway, watching shadows play across the room. The baby whimpers softly in the crib, and Victor moves forward on instinct. "Shh," he murmurs, reaching down to touch his child's cheek. The skin is warm, too warm. Victor's heart stumbles as he places his whole palm against the baby's forehead. Heat radiates through his skin, and the whimpers grow stronger. "Margaret?" His voice cracks. "Margaret!" The nanny appears within moments, her experienced hands confirming what Victor's heart already knows. "It's a fever, Mr. Langford." "A bad one." Victor watches helplessly as Margaret takes the baby's temperature, her face growing more concerned with each passing second. "Should we call the doctor?" "Yes, but..." Margaret hesitates, her eyes meeting Victor's. "I think we should call Clara, too." The name hits him like a physical blow. "The contract." "Hang the contract." Margaret's voice turns steel. That child needs its mother. Victor turns away, but not before Margaret sees the raw pain in his expression. She pulls out her phone, fingers already dialing. "I'll call her myself." Clara's phone vibrates against her nightstand, startling her from fitful sleep. Margaret's name on the screen sends her heart racing before she even answers. "The baby has a fever." Margaret's voice trembles. "It's bad, Clara. You need to come." Clara's already moving, phone pressed between ear and shoulder as she pulls on clothes. "How high?" 104 and climbing. "The doctor's on his way, but I'm coming." Clara grabs her keys, her coat, her shoes. The contract, the hurt, the careful distance she's maintained, none of it matters. "Tell them I'm coming." Rain pounds against her windshield as Clara drives, each traffic light an eternity of red. The mansion appears through the downpour like a ghost, windows glowing against the night sky. Clara doesn't bother with the doorbell, using her old key before she can think about what that means. The baby's cries lead her upstairs, each step bringing back memories she's tried so hard to bury. She bursts into the nursery, breath ragged, heart pounding. Margaret cradles the baby, whose face is flushed with fever. Victor stands by the window, his usual composure shattered. When he turns, sees dark circles under his eyes, his shirt wrinkled, his hair mussed from running his hands through it. Clara. Her name falls from his lips like a prayer. She moves forward, arms already reaching. Margaret transfers the baby without a word, and Clara pulls the small body close to her chest. "I'm here, baby. I've got you." The child's cries soften at her voice, though the fever still burns hot against Clara's skin. She grabs a cloth from the changing table, dips it in cool water, and begins wiping the baby's forehead and neck. Muscle memory takes over as she hums an old lullaby, one her mother used to sing. "The doctor's on his way," Victor says, his voice rough. He steps closer, drawn by some force he can't resist. "Clara, not now." Clara keeps her eyes on the baby, afraid of what she'll see in Victor's face. Just not now. Hours blur together as they wait for the fever to break. The doctor comes and goes, leaving medicine and instructions. Margaret brings fresh cloths, water, anything they need. Through it all, Clara holds the baby, murmuring comfort, refusing to let go. Dawn creeps through the windows before the fever finally breaks. The baby sleeps peacefully at last, breath even and deep. Clara's arms ache, but she can't bring herself to put the child down. "You should rest." Victor's voice comes soft from the doorway where he's kept vigil. "There's a bed. I'm fine here." Clara settles deeper into the rocking chair, adjusted to her body from months of late-night feedings. Victor moves into the room, his steps hesitant. "Clara, I was wrong." She looks up, startled by the raw emotion in his voice. Victor Langford, always so controlled, looks completely undone. "I thought..." He runs a hand through his hair, leaving it standing on end. "I thought pushing you away would protect me, but all it did was leave me empty." Tears blur Clara's vision. "I didn't want to leave, Victor. I wanted you to ask me to stay, not as part of a deal, but because you cared. I care." He kneels beside the rocking chair, close enough that Clara can see the stubble on his jaw, the redness in his eyes. "I love you, Clara. I just didn't know how to show it." A sob catches in her throat. I love you too. Victor's hand finds hers, fingers intertwining. The baby sighs in sleep, turning slightly toward Clara's warmth. Morning light fills the nursery, painting everything in soft gold. Clara still sits in the rocking chair, the baby sleeping peacefully in her arms. Victor leans against the door frame, watching them both with an expression she's never seen before. Open, vulnerable, real. "You saved both of us," he says quietly, pushing away from the door. His steps are sure now as he crosses to them. Clara looks up, finding none of the old barriers in his eyes. "Victor?" He pulls a folded paper from his pocket, the surrogacy contract, worn at the edges from handling. Without a word, he tears it in half, then quarters, letting the pieces fall like snow. "No more deals," Victor says. "No more conditions, just love." Clara's breath catches as Victor kneels beside her chair. His hand covers hers where it rests on the baby's back. For the first time, there's nothing between them. No contracts, no pretenses, no fears. "I want that too," Clara whispers, her voice trembling. The baby stirs, making soft noises of contentment. Clara smiles through her tears, feeling Victor's hand tighten on hers. They are a family, imperfect, unexpected, but real. Sunlight streams through the nursery windows the next morning, warming the room. The storm has passed, leaving everything feeling clean and new. Victor holds the baby, murmuring softly as he paces. Clara watches from the doorway, peace settling over her like a familiar blanket. "Let's build something together," Victor says, turning to face her. "No contracts, no expectations, just us." Clara's heart swells. For the first time in her life, the future stretches bright before her, full of possibility instead of struggle. "I've spent my whole life fighting to survive," she says, moving closer. "Now I want to live." Victor nods, his eyes bright with hope. "We'll do it together." He hands the baby to Clara, then wraps his arms around them both. The walls of the mansion seem to breathe, no longer a prison of wealth and loneliness, but a home waiting to be filled with life. Laughter echoes through the halls weeks later, bouncing off marble floors that once knew only the click of expensive shoes. In the living room, Clara and Victor sit on a blanket spread across the floor. The baby giggles, reaching for a stuffed bear with determined concentration. Sunlight pours through windows that stand permanently open now, carrying the scent of the garden Clara has begun to cultivate. Family photos line the shelves, real moments captured in time. The baby's first steps, Clara asleep in Victor's arms, Margaret teaching them both how to give a proper bath. Victor's arm wraps around Clara's shoulders and she leans into him without hesitation. The baby's laughter rises again, pure joy filling the space between heartbeats. Clara closes her eyes, a smile touching her lips. The journey was long, the pain real, but finally, they found what they were searching for. Love, trust, and a place to call home. Not in contracts or conditions, but in the simple truth of three hearts beating in time, building a future together. Thank you so much for watching and listening to our story. Your time and support mean the world to us. If this video resonated with you, please share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear what you think. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring content. Your engagement helps us grow and continue sharing meaningful stories. See you in the next video.